I'll respond to questions.
So, Governor, they laid out two options here today. Is your plan to encourage people to go forward with option one and seek the approval from these three agencies to do the certificate?
I support option one. There are about four different options that are far preferable than this that were presented to the legislature. None of those were enacted, so this is the fifth choice in terms of financing this project. And ultimately the decisions that need to be made will be made by independent bodies, the Metropolitan Council, the CTIB board, and Hennepin County board. But I believe this project is in the best interest of the metropolitan region. I believe this is in the best interest of Minnesota, and I believe it's very important to go forward.
Commissioner Dunnick, have you reached out to your counterparts at CTIB and some of the local counties to see, kind of take their temperature on this and whether it's feasible?
We started to do that yesterday, and we had conversations. Some of them are here. They can answer your question, too. But we started to talk to them yesterday. I mean, this came together relatively quickly because it had to. And, you know, we're cautiously optimistic that something like what we presented today is something that their boards and bodies would approve. You know, we still have to do all that. There's going to be public involvement for that, for their bodies as well as ours. I have a council of 16 members that some of them are going to have different opinions about it, but we're going to go through that process hopefully in the next week.
So we could characterize it as you intend to pursue this option one, and you believe the other two entities are going to as well. Is it fair to say it's in process?
It's just beginning process, and I think today was an important part of that process of hearing from what people were going to say, what they're, you know, there could have been a room full of people who said stop the project, it's not worth doing, but that's not what I heard. I don't think that's what other people heard, and so now it's a question of taking that in and continuing the next week. It's our intention to pursue it if there's support for it.
How do you respond to the issue that was raised by the senator today about your letter to Representative Kelly last summer and maybe some verbal comments?
Well, I overruled him. I said we're going to go ahead. We're going to sell certificates of participation next July. We're going to give the legislature the next year an opportunity, 5 months of a regular session, to come in and interject themselves into this. So the certificates of participation would not be issued until after that legislative session. July of next year, but you know, as I said, there were four preferred options that were all, you know, not supported. So you know, we're in the executive branch of government. It's my responsibility to lead the executive branch of government, and this is the authority that we have that's been given by the previous legislatures to the Met Council, to the CTIB board, to Hennepin County, and so those officials have a right to exercise what they believe is in the best interest of their constituents, and I have a right to exercise what I believe is in the best interest of our constituents, and that within the parameters of what's been established by previous legislatures.
What are the consequences of option one for the future of transit funding in the region? It's a lot of money coming from CTIB, which is also already dealing with the withdrawal of Dakota County.
I'm Peter McLaughlin. I'm chair of CTIB and also chair of the Hennepin County Regional Railroad Authority. This is going to it's going to stretch CTIB's resources, but we have a situation where we've got a project that is teed up right now that needs action, and we can't afford to whiff on that project this year. It's going to be costly. There's $140 million that's already been invested in this, in the Southwest line, and to squander that or to delay it and rethink the thing from page one on the thing, that's a guarantee of $50 million a year for every year that you delay. That's a waste of money. We have studied this, and I am hopeful that the CTIB board is going to come forward and vote to increase its share modestly so that this project can go forward. And as the governor said, we've got another legislative session to find an alternative that's better, and we've supported better alternatives than this one. But we need to have something that we can point to in our federal application so that we can compete this year this coming year for the federal funds that we need.
So you take this to the feds now, and you have a chance to go back to the legislature before the federal funding agreement is official and come up with a better plan?
as I understand it, we can, this will be presented, if we approve this would go into the application that the Met Council would send to the federal government. We'd have all of the local money in place, but the federal government would allow us to change that if the legislature comes up with a better way of doing it next year. They're very open to that.
Or if the legislature says that passes a statute that says they cannot issue certificates of participation, and then the project won't be able to proceed. You know, this has gone on for, I believe it's 10 years. In preliminary stages through this whole process, others can articulate the details better than I, but the fact that the business community, the leadership in the business community in Chambers, from Eden Prairie to Twin West to Minneapolis, that and Minnesota Business Partnership and others support this, that labor supports it, that a whole vast array of people looking at the future of transit in the metropolitan area support it. It's never going to be unanimous. I understand that. But it is a point where, the process has engaged thousands of people over multiple years and has been reviewed and re-reviewed, and the route was reviewed and re-reviewed, and you know, this is it. This is it. And it's time to either decide we're going to proceed, which I think is in the best interest of the metropolitan region and the state of Minnesota, because what benefits the metro region benefits the whole state. What benefits greater Minnesota benefits the metro region. We are one state. And try to divide people based on geography, as well as somebody's getting something that's taking away from something else. It's not about that. It's about expanding the economic pie so we have more for everything, buddy, and all the needs of this state. And this project is essential to achieving that. The people who oppose this project have no alternative. You know, you look at a map of the metropolitan area, you can readily see there's no rapid bus route on highways that are direct that serve these different cities. So, you know, if those who oppose the project have a responsibility to offer a better alternative, and I've not heard one.
Governor, the Chamber of Commerce and some of the lawmakers today said that if this goes forward, this Plan 5 gets adopted and South and South Rail has its funding, with that issue removed, then you should revisit the idea of a special session for the tax bill bonding.
I haven't thought about it. I haven't talked to any of the leaders about it. I'd be premature to say. There were other issues. It's a fallacy that this was the sole reason that we did not come to an agreement. There are all the transportation issues, the earmarking of those projects in the transportation bill was still unresolved. The funding for a couple of Fort Snelling, for example, the bonding project, the additional operating money for St. Peter facilities. So there are other issues involved. You know, the clock has been ticking. We're at the state fair. We got the start of Labor Day. We got 201 elections around the state. I think the opportunities had passed. We had the opportunity to achieve what we couldn't achieve, what the legislature couldn't achieve in the regular session, and what we were not able to achieve a reconciliation in the last 3 months. And I think that's the way things stand.
Any other questions?
Governor, this is related to the Met Council in a way. Did you have any opinion about the Supreme Court's ruling about privacy of videos taken on?
I'm not well enough versed in it to be able to comment.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks very much.
Well, for those of you that are still around, my name is Tony Albright. I'm a representative from Scott County, and I have some alternative viewpoints than you've just recently heard from the governor. Unfortunately, I think from the governor's statements, it's unfortunate that he left a tax bill and a bonding bill on the table unresolved, and from what our caucus perspective is, this was a single issue that if we clearly now see could have been set aside for the benefit of that. We would have seen a tax bill and a bonding bill that passed both houses bipartisanly in overwhelming percentages passed into law. But contrary to what the governor said, he, from our perception, did hold the bills hostage for the sake of SWLRT. I think that's unfortunate. I would draw him back to his commitment and his word that he was not going to. But it's apparent today that we are up against kind of a situation where the sands have shifted underneath our feet in terms of what we were to understand. So I'm disappointed. I think that we have a larger prerogative as state representatives to take care of the whole of the state, as opposed to hearing from some constituents that even though they are in support of this, it would not be favorable by the House caucus. So I'm happy to answer any questions that you have.
Representative, the governor and Chair Dunnick there seem to say that they intend to go forward with this option 1, I think they were calling it. Is that a mistake?
Well, I think it's an end run. If he wanted to engage in the process of robust conversation about it, bring it forward, and we're happy to have a conversation about it. But to take on a meeting of this nature without bringing it to either the House or the Senate on his terms, I think it really slights the three-legged stool, if you will, of the legislative process. And we would call him back to his commitment that he would not going to hold either of those bills hostage for the sake of SWLRT.
You started to speak to this pledge that you feel that Dunnick made to House and Senate leadership. Did he make that to you verbally?
I had a conversation with him in my office, but it also was in a letter that he confirmed that if the legislature did not act to fund SWLRT, that the progress made on that program would stop. And now all of a sudden,
did you feel he was speaking for the governor when he made that commitment?
he is appointed by the governor, and to the extent that he speaks for the governor, based upon his chairmanship of the Met Council and for the designs and the desires that the governor has for the Met Council, I think you can understand our confusing nature in terms of if he's a proxy for the governor, why that wasn't held up to be the governor's statement as well.
Representative, is your objection to this project primarily the cost aspect of it, that the state taxpayers should be asked to pay some share of the operating costs, or in another plan the capital costs, or even if all the money were paid for by other, and if Fed were paying 100% of this project, do you still object to Southwest Light Rail?
Well, I think you heard from some of the opponents that live in the areas where SWLRT goes. It doesn't provide for the frequency and or the vicinity to where they live. You're putting down a hard and fast route that does not accommodate the dynamics of communities or the business community either. And so to the extent that we disagree in terms of the rigidity of the system, I think if you take a look at any other type of mass transit, you avail yourself to greater flexibility, to maneuver as the dynamics of the communities and the business community change. And without that, you are, in a sense, obligating not only the communities to utilize it, but the legislature to fund something that in 10 years may be obsolete based upon the dynamics of technology and telecommuting, what have you. We are, as we heard in there, we are relying upon a technology that is so old that we are committing to it for the next several generations, and I think that is not good policy.
Representative Albright, would you say that this has come up a lot in your conversations with constituents, door knocking and canvassing part of the re-election effort?
To your point, I think Senator Pratt said it well, as particularly in Scott County. If you take a look at the comments that we've heard from Carver, from Dakota, this doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense for a lot of reasons, for the sake that we have a geographically dispersed metropolitan area. And if you want to, as the commissioner elaborated, he wants to build this out. You're talking about hundreds of billions of dollars as a commitment, not only from the state, but a reliance upon the federal government to support that notion for a full build-out. That's the CapEx. You add the OpEx on top of that, and you defray the money available and the funding available from the state government for other very important programs. You heard it talked about that our obligations are for safety, for education, and for transportation. If you're putting all your eggs in one basket on one line based upon a light rail line, what are you going to do when we have a downturn in the economy, or you have a changing dynamic for how you want to educate your people for the workforce of the future, or you want to provide public safety? Whether it be cybersecurity, which is going to be a big issue in the next several years. I think that we're chasing after a bright, shiny object that doesn't make sense for the way that our state is going forward.
So for someone that would argue that the $10 million in operating expenses per year would be just a slice of the state's $18 billion budget,
that's just a slice, but if you put into the development the entirety of the system that the Commissioner McLaughlin talks about, you're talking about a drag on the general fund as an obligation, as I mentioned to the governor, that would take away the opportunity for us to speak to the other issues dynamically in the future that we have to address, and it would obligate our legislature to those issues based upon a one-time decision for a transit system that will not reflect the dynamics that they are going to change over time. Thank you.
So I'd just like to respond. Peter McLaughlin again from CTIB and the Hennepin County Rail Authority. You know, if you look at that pie chart up there, there's now going to, with the option one, there's not going to be a penny more of state capital put into this project, and the state share of this project would be 1%. And the proposals that were put forward for capital and operating using a sales tax in the metropolitan area, the proposal that the governor and the Senate were supportive of, the state was going to be out of the business of supporting Metro Transit, the capital side and the operating side. We were saying we'll do it here locally because frankly the transaction costs of getting these things approved at the state level are just, they're too high, and region after region across the country that's building its systems out have been doing it at a regional level. That's what we wanted to do. And you know, the comment that Scott County imposed a half-a-cent sales tax, we don't have the authority to do that in the 5 counties that are in CTIB. We don't have that authority. We were asking for that extra quarter cent. We were ready to do that, but we don't have that authority from the legislature. We're trying to take rural Minnesota off the hook. We're trying to get this thing built out with resources here in the region because we believe it's so important to our future. As to this inflexibility of the transit system, I view that as an asset. If you take an aerial photograph of the Toronto area, you can tell where there's a transit station because there's growth around those stations. And over the long haul, having people close to the transit, that's going to lead to a lot fewer trips that have to be taken in cars, and that's where the stability comes. The investment comes when there is stability. Go down near Target Field Station. People are investing down there. Be the match. They've got 900 people working at the office building right across from Target Field, right at Target Field Station. And you talk to the people who were doing the leasing of that, they wanted to be there because they had a guarantee that there was going to be transit service now, tomorrow, and decades to come.
So the argument that you can move a bus route easier than you can move a train route, that doesn't wash with you.
No, I think it's actually there's a place for bus routes and flexibility, but on these big radial corridors, and that's what we're talking about here with Southwest, with Bottineau, with the University Avenue, Hiawatha, these big radial corridors, you want to have the stability. And the investment we're making in 35W, the investment we'd make in the Gateway Corridor, that's going to be there. There's a guarantee, and those are buses, those last two, but it's a guarantee that the transit service is going to be there. We used to have a great fancy bus stop at Hennepin County Government Center on 3rd Avenue. Well, that's gone now because they moved the bus. And so, I mean, businesses that want to invest, and you ask the people in in Hopkins, the planners, or in St. Louis Park, they've got plans for their communities to grow in the future. And it's because they've integrated this transportation option into those development plans. And that stability and guarantee is really what makes it happen.
Question on option one, you've got $20 million in there for CTIB, and you are replacing the state money with that. But doesn't state law say that CTIB money can supplement but not supplant state money?
Well, the fact is the state money was never there, so there's nothing to supplant, Bob.
It could come up.
Well, the state money was never there, so we're not supplanting anything. Anybody else? All right, thanks.